used as an excuse to supply Israel's enemies and prolong the war against Hamas. So Israel is passing a law declaring UNRWA a terrorist organization. Meanwhile, more and more countries are restoring their funding to the UN body. All this when UNRWA staff showed support for October the 7th, and some even took part in it.
Welcome to the reality show. Today we're joined by Jonathan Hoenig. Jonathan, before I come to you, I'd just like to remind people what UNRWA is. UNRWA is the acronym that stands for United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees in the Near East. So this is a specially created UN body for an elite of people who made a career out of playing the victims for the last 76 years. They run schools, they run health clinics, they build some infrastructure, they distribute some food, and they operate in Gaza, the West Bank, Lebanon, Syria, and Jordan. So what do you make about this development, this news?
Well, great to be with you both and to have our audience from all over the world, especially in the UK, joining us once again. I'm delighted to see it. I mean, Israel proclaiming UNRWA to be a terrorist organization won't do a lot of things, but I hope it will help bring some eyeballs to what we've been pointing out over and over again. UNRWA seems to be at the middle of not only just perpetuating the current crisis, the current war. You know, we talked about how, for example, just in the last couple of weeks, it was discovered that hostages were found in facilities that UNRWA was operating or on which they were under control. But what worries me even more is, as we've highlighted, UNRWA training the next generation of terrorists. They are perpetuating the ideas that made October 7th possible. This is from a CBN report I'll share from 2 years ago about a Gaza summer training camp. As CBN described it, training the next generation. Wait, do I have it? As CBN described, changing the next generation of terrorists. This is from 2 years ago.
Call them the pioneers of liberation in the Sword of Jerusalem summer camps run by Hamas and Islamic Jihad. These videos, posted by Memory, the Middle East Media Research Institute, show what the youth of Gaza are doing this summer.
We did not come here to enjoy ourselves or to play or anything like that. We came with our souls, blood, our martyrs, and are wounded to sacrifice ourselves for Palestine and for our people.
Now, you don't have to tell me that some of those kids 2 years ago who were going to summer camp, role-playing being terrorists, didn't take part in exactly what we just saw. And who is literally funding it, organizing it? UNRWA, the United Nations bullshit relief organization. And it just takes me back to what Ms. Rand talked about and wrote about at great lengths about the United Nations decades ago. She says, basically, I'm summarizing, but it gave cover to some of the worst ideas, ideologies, and organizations on earth. And this is the best example of it. I mean, we are funding, or we have been funding, exactly the organizations which have made this terrorism possible. So not only should we declare them a terrorist state, but should cut off all funding for the United Nations, UNRWA in particular.
Yeah, for sure. And we've seen a lot of evidence to do with how closely linked UNRWA is to the terrorism of October the 7th as well. We've seen all the Telegram chats of the UNRWA teachers showing their delight on October the 7th and the messages going between them. We've seen the things which led to some staff being fired from UNRWA, including the two participants. One was involved in a kidnap, and one was helped steal a soldier's body on the day of October the 7th. And we've seen footage of that. They mentioned 12 UNRWA employees at the time, Israel did, who were engaged specifically in it, but there were supposed to be over 2,000 who'd shown considerable sympathies for it out of the 32,000 that work for UNRWA. I think what's going on at the moment is they're putting it through Parliament in Israel, and I think it's past the first stage of Parliament, but there are further readings to see if it actually becomes law. So it's already past the first hurdle, but we'll have to see if it actually gets all the way. One of the things it would mean would be severing diplomatic ties with UNRWA if it is passed, which might well be significant. But of course, at the moment, we've got the G7 meeting in Italy. And in the last hour or so, they've released some of the wording that's going to be part of their communique at the end of it. And it refers to UNRWA. So I just quote from it. We agree it is critical that UNRWA and other UN organizations and agencies, distribution networks, be fully able to deliver aid to those who need it most, fulfilling their mandate effectively. That's what the leaders of the G7 are saying at the moment. I mean, even the fact that the G7 get together and come up with a joint communique is the cult of compromise in any situation, wouldn't you say, Jonathan?
Yeah, I mean, by what right do these people deserve aid? I mean, here's the headline from months ago now. IDF recordings show more UNRWA staffers bragging about October 7th crimes. I mean, they're not just aiding and abetting, harboring terrorists, but participating in the crimes. And it's only altruism in my mind, which people feel like, well, we have to have something. It's only like their own guilt. I can't really explain it, that we are literally funding the organization engaging in these crimes, perpetuating these terrorist acts, training the next generation. That to me is the most eerie. And we played some tape just a couple of weeks ago of these UNRWA schools and what they're taught to make themselves martyrs, go after Jews by name, and that they are the oppressors that they need to take revenge on. I mean, this is happening in the name of the United Nations. And what is it? Is it like multiculturalism? We say, well, gee, we can't really judge what's being taught. After all, this is their schools. I mean, is that the explanation of why we're allowed that to go on? Because they're just training the next generation of October 7th barbarians as UNRWA was 2 years ago.
Yes, and those interviews with children, especially in the West Bank, who talk openly, I want to grow up and I want to hit Jews with my car when I'm older. That it's open, it's there on the web. So don't take our word. It's just there. Just go out to the web, look at these interviews. They are blood curdling, because you see these children utterly brainwashed. And imagine what they're going to be doing when they're older with that kind of mentality. But as you were saying earlier on, when Israel initially made the complaint about UNRWA, I think at the beginning of this year or the end of the previous year, UNRWA immediately sacked 9 people. Now, for a body like that to sack 9 people because they were so incredibly guilty of supporting Hamas, the evidence must have been overwhelming. But then after that, there was a review run by UNRWA itself. So imagine how objective that was, which completed on the 24th of April. And at the end of the review, which resulted in 15 recommendations, part of the report says something like that UNRWA has got more than other similar NGOs or UN entities in terms of approach to neutrality. Go figure. Imagine the others are rotten there. And they came up with this 15 recommendation. But the most important thing is that the inquiry, the internal inquiry run by themselves, found a comprehensive set of rules, regulation, policies, guidelines, and procedures in place to ensure the neutrality of the staff. It's like, yeah, you might well have the paperwork, but nobody has read it. And at the end of it, all it did, they set aside an additional $10 million to their budget. Their budget is already about 2.2 billion. But this internal review, prompted by the fact that Israel pointed out that there are Hamas people working for UNRWA, resulted in 10 more millions for UNRWA. Yeah, great success. Of course, there are 13,000 people just on the Gaza side of UNRWA, and these people are not parachuted from Mars. There are people who live in Gaza, who voted for Hamas, who support Hamas, who work for Hamas. And they do the kind of stuff they do. They steal food and sell it to the black market, or just provide it with priority to the Hamas terrorists. They do all sorts of things, and of course, some of them even took part during the October 7 atrocities.
Yeah, Ayn Rand makes the point, it's really ideas that move the world. And, what motivates a kid to grow up and take part in the unbelievably butcherous savagery that, we have covered that occurred on October 7th? I mean, the not just coming in and shooting up a couple of people, but the blood-curdling, head-severing type of, like, where do they learn that? Well, maybe at some of these Gaza summer camps that occurred just, a couple of years ago, where they basically were role-playing exactly these scenarios.
How to take security measures so that they will follow in the footsteps of their fathers and take up arms, Allah willing.
I chose to spend my vacation in the Pioneers of Liberation summer camp in order to continue the path of my father, the martyred commander Walid Shamala Abu Bilal, and in order to strengthen our determination and to liberate Jerusalem. I
mean, it's like, there you go. So we're so at God, like, what could motivate these people to come in? And we've talked about it. All the blood-chilling tape that's come out of October 7th. I mean, you could spend a weekend just covering some of it, but that tape of, once again, of that young man who was thankfully abducted by the IDF, describing, oh yeah, his dad had a turn raping a woman, and then his uncle had a turn, then he and his friends went in and had a turn, and then he went in to check on the woman, and she had been just shot like an absolute animal. I mean, where do they learn that? At these UNRWA camps. So it's just straight up Hitler youth, once again. I mean, teaching the next generation the same murderous barbarian ideas that, and it's not just Palestinian taxpayers that are coughing up the cash. It's Britain, the US, and all the like.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, you mentioned Hitler there. Actually, most of the staff at Hamas, there was a report that most of them, a big number of them, seem to be part of the Hitler Appreciation Society, because they always support openly Hitler, and they say Hitler should have gone forward. They're incredibly, terribly anti-Semitic. They are really real monsters, the war for UNRWA. And it's all documented. They tweet, they talk about the open.
People say, oh, well, Marco and Richard, come on, you've got to do something to help these people in need. Come on, you guys. Ayn Rand is so heartless. You're not helping. What about all the meals they're serving? What about all the schools they're building? Oh, yeah. Happens to be the schools where they're hiding all the weapons and teaching these people. But, we sound like heretics proposing that UNRWA is a terrorist organization. People are like, what?
I know, but even people who say that, they don't focus on the fact that what's best for everyone, including those Palestinian children, in the long run, in the long term, is that Hamas is defeated, the ideology is defeated, and they have a chance at a proper life based on individual rights, isn't it? Same as they would have if they grew up in Israel. There should be no difference from that point of view, but it's the ideology that has led them to this point, and it's Hamas that is instigating that ideology within this UNRWA network. And the report that Marco referred to there was the independent report, supposedly independent, was led by the former French Minister for Europe and Foreign Affairs, Catherine Colonna, and she came up with all sorts of recommendations, some of which Marco mentioned there, including updating their code of ethics, because that's going to solve everything, isn't it? Or having a centralized neutrality investigations unit, or an integrity briefing for donors. And of course, that's the element they really care about, is the donors. It's restoring. Sorry?
Donors. It's like one of those things you can put it in quotes a little bit, donors.
For sure. No, absolutely. And of course, so many countries have already restored their funding. Australia, Canada, Sweden, and Japan have already restored their funding to UNRWA that they suspended at the time when the initial, details came out. And of course, lots of the countries that did suspend funding, or including some of those that have already suspended funding and continue to do so, they've already given this year's allocation. So it's a bit of a pretense that they've stopped the funding in the first place.
If you care about humanity, you should want these Palestinian children and families to be, on some level, suffering. feeling the effects of these ideas on themselves, on their communities. But the fact that taxpayers, American, British taxpayers, are funding the schools that and harboring the employees or engaging the employees that are harboring the hostages themselves. Ayn Rand, read what Ayn Rand wrote about the UN 40 years ago. I mean, she hit the nail on the head in terms of giving cover to some of the worst murderous ideologies. And, it's like, it's such two-faced. It's like on one level you say, oh, don't you care about kids in need? But as you pointed out, do you care about them if you're teaching them the murderous ideologies that prompts them to go in and take a hang glider into Israel, drop in, shoot a bunch of totally innocent kids at a camp? And I don't want you to mention what happens with the women that they caught and some of the men. Can we give a shout out to our people who are actually making difference? They are supporting us on Super Chat.
Yeah, for sure. That includes Bonnie. Thank you very much, Bonnie, with your $1, and and I know you're such a regular supporter of this channel, so we do appreciate that in every single show. We appreciate it. Gail Parker, thank you for your $2.99. We appreciate it as well. And Kathleen, with £5, says, "What is the end game of the UN? Seems they have been planning against Israel for a long time. Where are they taking all this? Global dictatorship?"
And I'll quickly add Sean Pierre, who became a member. Thank you, because it's like £4 or £5 a month. I mean, it's a pittance compared to what you're getting on Netflix. You probably get Netflix, you get 1 or 2 shows you like. We give you 2 completely original shows from experts in objectivism, people like James Valiant, so many others, every day, breaking news and probably some of the most original ideas that you're going to find. I mean, what is the end game? I wish I could speak to that other than reading exactly the same murderous ideologies generation after generation. I mean, read what Rand wrote about the UN and where it was heading. I mean, it's exactly as she talked about decades ago, I think, is played out. It's enabled and emboldened the worst actors on the national stage. And even to this day, I mean, didn't the UN put the flag at half-mast when the murderous dictator of Iran, his chopper went down? So they're doing that once again. And oh my God, how many proclamations against Israel have do they continue to type out on their Smith Corona typewriter?
Yeah, and the UN, of course, one of the 5 not founding member, but one of the main members who has the veto on the procedure, not the procedure matter anyway, but it's Russia. What's Russia done is currently involved in a war where they are the aggressors. So you have a bunch of states under the umbrella of love and peace across the world, who are some of the members are some of the worst dictatorships currently in the world. So you got the Islamic Republic of Iran's vote to count as much as, I don't know, the Netherlands. You got this kind of people equating dictatorship with civilized countries, with the respect for individual rights is absolutely barbarous. It's a corruption of anything that you believe in, if you really believe in peace and collaboration among people. And that's just hideous. The way that the United States, the United Nations works by enabling all these tin pot countries and their dictatorship to effectively force their will or be used by bigger players like China or Russia in order to perpetrate their horrific deeds is just beyond belief. And as far as the end game is, well, I don't know what the end game is, but it says it's not looking very good right now, wherever it's going to end up.
I mean, world government, that term has a lot of conspiracy theorist associations oftentimes, but it does kind of seem like that. The UN becomes this non-elected body that somehow carries some weight, carries some moral compass. And I want to mention, Rand was asked in a new textbook of Americanism about should Americans reject the conception of a world government, and she talks about that at great lengths. So check that out, and also check out her writings on the United Nations overall. I mean, forget even the legal or the financial impact of the millions and millions and hundreds of millions that they suck up of dollars. I'm just worried about the ideas that they propagate and the terrible societies that they prop up. And, you know, like, we're okay judging, I think I speak for you gentlemen, we're okay judging here at the Ayn Rand Center UK. Judge and prepared to be judged. And I look at the Palestinian society and I think it's pretty fucking savage. I think sending your kids to summer camp and have them play around with guns and pretend to kill people is pretty horrific. So why are we subsidizing that? Israel is right. We should declare them a terrorist organization. What are they doing? They're training the next generation of terrorists and hiding the hostages of the current generation of terrorists. They're aiding and abetting the worst militant, ugly Islamic shitheads on earth. Excuse my French.
No, well, it's true. It's absolutely true. Yeah. And I noticed that a couple of things have happened this past week in relation to UNRWA. This past Wednesday, Philip Lazzarini, the Commissar General of UNRWA, why do they always have titles that makes them sound like they're in the Red Army? But anyway, he's been to see Erdogan in Turkey to try and organize for a new UNRWA office in Ankara. And not only that, he's trying to persuade Turkey to lobby other countries in the Middle East, particularly the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, to stump up more funding to replace that's been suspended, temporarily, probably only temporarily by countries like the US and the UK who are still doing it. So once again, you've got that moral grayness, that compromise with characters like Erdogan. So it forever becomes more corrupt and more distasteful the longer it continues to exist. And then secondly, the other thing that's happened is that in the Netherlands, and this is just the latest example, they've just restored funding in the sense that they've come up with 13 million euros for Gaza relief, and that includes 3 million specifically for UNRWA. But of course, they're currently saying that it should be suspended, it should be held in reserve until whilst UNRWA proves that it's neutral. But again, it's yet another fudge after fudge after fudge. But of course, the point is you're giving the money back and you're signaling to other countries that it's time to start funding them again.
Yeah, I mean, someone pointed out another generous super chatter, and I have to say, we not only appreciate the super chat support, we really need it. We've got a couple of young people, men and women all over the world, who are dedicating their time. A few of them were able to actually pay a small pittance to because of people like PC. Thank you for your 10 pounds, very generous. PC points out that the UN has accused Israel of genocide in getting the hostages back in this last week. I mean, an amazingly professional, detailed, pinpoint procedure, which was there on a defensive mission to get back people that they don't have any right to hold. We covered that here in the Ayn Rand Center UK. And here's the UN, which we fund, turning around and saying, well, Israel, what did they do? Yeah, well, if everyone's opening fire on you and you're trying to leave, you have every right to retaliate. Who other than Ayn Rand Center UK and a few others are making these philosophical points? Thank you, PC.
Yeah, and also let's remember that only a few days ago, there was a strike on a UNRWA school where 9 Hamas terrorists were killed because they, of course, hide in infrastructure protected under the UN flag, because they know that Israel is too flipping altruistic and too worried about killing a civilian enemy that will go out of its way not to sacrifice his own soldier in order to minimize the losses on the side. But again, in a UNRWA-funded school, i.e. funded by us, 9 terrorists were hiding. So, and you see from the pictures how incredibly precise and careful the hit was, because it didn't destroy the whole school. It just hit the floor where the terrorists were hiding. Who else?
You can see how over and over again they use UNRWA. They hide weapons, they hide military all around. Hamas and the Palestinians, it seems, are just beautiful at starting a war, getting retaliated against and saying, oh, we are such the victims of your retaliation. But it's more retaliation. It's just retaliation. You know, it's deserved and needed retaliation against a terrible aggressor. And the ideology, again, is really what frightens me. Equal to reality. Thank you for your contribution. He wanted to get some of the links to the videos, and we've shared that. We're going to share that on the screen because, you know, guys, I don't know, what did you do? You grew up in Europe. You probably went to some cool athletic, maybe soccer summer camp, swimming, you know, but my sense is you and you didn't go to a summer camp like this.
Control. In 10, 15 years from now, the kids will be adults or parents and maybe even an officials in Gaza and decision makers. So the extremism in Gaza will be even worse.
Hamas took over the Gaza Strip 13 years ago in a bloody battle.
Literally at UN summer camps. That's what they were learning. That was 2 years ago. And surprise, surprise, October 7th.
Yeah. It beggars belief, isn't it? I don't understand how the UN is able to retain such a cachet among so many people for having still a sense of neutrality and authority to it, when it's shown time and time again that it has you know it doesn't have the right to either claim for sure. And yet I mean, I feel like we keep covering this subject and trying to make sure we drive it through and explain the morality behind it, the morality of altruism and the problems with it. But I don't know to the extent that in the wider world, are people waking up to this? Are people really starting to see the UN more for what it is? My feeling is that maybe a little, but by no means enough.
Well, you know, Rand in so many topics, you know, wrote something or spoke on something. And in Capitalism, the Unknown Ideal, which is a great read, a really important read, you know, she talks about the UN in particular. And of course, you can search the Ayn Rand lexicon and to get little snippets of what Miss Rand talked about. But you know, she talks about it contributing to the gray swamp of demoralization, of cynicism, of bitterness, of hopelessness, fear, and nameless guilt, which is swallowing the Western world. And that was 40 plus years ago. And you do get a sense of that. I mean, you asked, why do people support it? I just think there is this overwhelming altruism that, you know, even the best can't seem to be able to escape. That is at the heart of that. And that's part of what people feel like. They like the idea of everyone getting one vote. They like the idea that, well, you know, if it's really the best idea, then a majority of a vote will win out. But that was never the case, right? I mean, individual rights, democracy, liberty has only been a small portion of entire human history. Most of the time, a majority vote is what we wanted to avoid. In fact, isn't that what we want to avoid, a majority vote? We should be based on principles, what is right. And to watch all these edicts get passed against Israel and condemnations of Israel and idolization of the worst civilizations on earth, where if you, I don't know, have a same-sex relationship, they throw you off a roof. Like that's what we're holding up as an exemplar of nobility in today's environment.
And at the same time, for government level, it seems like because they're all gutless and amoral and don't stand for anything, they're quite happy to leave it to the UN to come up with statements and direction, and then pretend they're powerless in the face of such statements and direction, simply to follow it slavishly. Once again, showing they have no backbone and no set of principles. I mean, that has often been the case with the UK and the EU in the past, and the UN is just another example of that, to be honest.
And also, the UN is a big pot of unaccountable officials, people who nobody knows who they are, nobody knows what they do. They can do what they want, and they are paid an enormous amount of money for what they do, because again, they're not accountable. States just pour money as foreign aid. And because of altruism, as you were mentioning before, surely it's something good. It's for the good of the world. So we don't even look into it. It doesn't matter if the money gets rerouted to Iran to pursue its nuclear program, or it goes to Hamas to destroy Israel. and all this kind of institution that the UN has, like UNESCO, UNICEF, or UN, whatever, they're effectively used to bribe countries, to buy their votes or to keep them on their side or whatever side of the argument they want to present. And of course, as I said, they are unaccountable. Nobody knows who the boss is. Nobody knows who the officials are. So they move in this kind of environment. And of course, as I said earlier on, because they can make it look like a charitable organization like UNRWA, how can you possibly cut its funding? What kind of terrible creature are you? You
don't care about the kids.
Yeah, exactly. And that has got such a leverage on a world which is poisoned by the altruistic morality. And of course, it works like it's a charm every time. Every time you argue, actually, if you look at what you're funding, but you can't do that because the aim, the good behind, the supposed good behind this organization trumps every logic and every thinking that people make. And that's the problem of not thinking in principle, not focusing on the essential when you analyze something.
I always feel like maybe before like modern communication, when literally countries needed a place to congregate and exchange information, like in the 1920s or something, maybe the UN was a good kind of meeting post where countries could, not the voting of it, but literally you could exchange. I think of a memorable moment from Adlai Stevenson, I believe in the 1960s, where he said to the Soviets, "We have these photos of your missile developments or your missile activity in Cuba." And there was a great public proclamation in the days before cable news and the internet that maybe that some benefit it served, but all this other fake moral authority. And I think you're right, gentlemen, that they call them the Secretary General of the United Nations. That little pin is worth nothing. It has a negative connotation. And I feel the same way. I believe I remember Dr. Peikoff saying that Ayn Rand would never accept a Nobel Peace Prize. And I feel the same thing about a United Nations proclamation. It's not worth the paper it's effing printed on. But the schools in particular are so dramatically dangerous that people cannot make the connection that we're funding the current and next generation of terrorists. Thank you. I have to mention to C. Delfaggio, support from Switzerland. Thank you so much. Great to know that there's advocates of reason in Switzerland, fans of Ayn Rand. Take this opportunity to pick up some of her work and learn a bit about what she thought on the United Nations, the Arab world, and Israel overall.
Absolutely, yeah. Now, what Israel's doing here in trying to put it through their own parliament and try and, the possibility that if it becomes full law, that they'll declare it a terrorist organization. In the scheme of things, it feels like Israel once again shouting in the wind on its own, because the rest of the world has essentially largely washed its hands and stood back as much as it can, and then come up with things like this communique by the G7 that I read out earlier. So yeah, it really does seem that enormous admiration for Israel in everything they're doing at the moment and setting the moral standard in so many ways. But really, they do need more support from around the world and from voices of anyone in any conversation, with your friends, with your family, to state the moral position here, and to not just go along with whatever's being said from the media, the mainstream media, in terms of their attitude towards the war in Gaza, but actually stating your position and making it clear that you don't concur with a lot of this narrative that's being laid out before us.
There just seems to be like a fear. Like, imagine if the United States said, we're only going to fund this if there's Western ideals, if there's capitalism, if there's individualism, if there's respect for religion's taught. But the United States would never have the balls to do that. They'd say, oh, well, we don't want to offend the Muslim world. There's a place for everything at the table. If this is what the people really want, we should let, so there's no insistence. It's like when, we set up a system of voting in Iraq. Voted in the Muslim Brotherhood. They voted in the worst possible ideas. And those cannot be acceptable. You cannot have hatred of Jews and war being taught, I think, anywhere, but certainly in a UN-funded school. It's like, are you freaking kidding me? that makes them the enemy. Just the same way as hiding the weapons makes you an enemy, makes you a legitimate military target, in my opinion. Just the way that Hitler Youth would have been a legitimate military target there. So let's not have that. Let's not fund that. And Israel's bravo to them for, again, being on the vanguard, and others should speak out as well.
Yes. And to be honest, Israel is being way too soft on this one. They know that UNRWA is a tool of Hamas. So just don't care about the UN. Just tell them to stick it. Come out of the UN altogether, as a matter of fact. Just look at the way they're behaving, like the genocide accusation and all this idiotic calls for Israel to stop defending itself. Just tell them to go and have a walk. Come out of every institution of the UN and go after the people who are trying to destroy your own state, the people who are trying to kill your citizens, and they actually did kill your citizens just 252 days ago. So I think Israel, by passing this law, again, is showing itself a bit too accommodating, a bit too compliant, and a bit too altruistic. It should be much more egoistic in the terms of a state which follows its own function, which is protecting the rights of the citizen, and that's it. And do everything you can to make sure the Israelis are never put in the situation ever again. But again, the whole state of Israel is pussyfooting around, and they're too afraid of being called bad people. But they will call you bad people anyway, because the hate out there is so high, and so many people came out with such hatred for Israel that they really shouldn't care about it. If you want to be on the side of Israel, good, support them. But if you're not, well, then Israel should just ignore them and go ahead and do the right thing.
Isn't that the altruism that, Israel should kind of just turn the other cheek? October 7th was bad, but if Israel should just, don't be so heavy-handed with your retaliation, take the first ceasefire that you give. Like, what could you have a discussion with if you sat down from leaders with Hamas? Like, all right, I know you butchered these people. Have you butchered what kind of legitimate conversation can you have with the head of North Korea or the head of Hamas? So it's like these people are butchers. And this is not Ayn Rand's words, but my sense is that type of force can only be met with accompanying force. It's the only language they understand.
And every previous occasion when altruism has been demonstrated to be the wrong path, even the disengagement from Gaza back in 2005-06, when of course that was supposed to be a brand new dawn and Palestinians were supposed to have the chance to run their own territory and etc. And of course what's happened, it was endless rockets and of course October 7th. That broke the peace that existed before then. So, people never want to refer back to everything they said at the time about, just turn the other cheek back then. Just give this up. Let them have that, because then.
And let Gigi Hadid, let the Hadid family fund all the schools. They want to be so generous. Let them lead a humanitarian effort. I think they're crazy necessarily, but let them, if you really believe there's a humanitarian crisis in Palestine and in Gaza, let some private enterprise supply it and deal with Hamas and deal with all those actors. But to have any type of American or Western involved with basically funding our killers. Rand talks about evil is, I'm bastardizing the quote, but what is it? Effective, it's only has the power that we give it. This just seems like the best example of it. Where are they learning these ideas to kill Jews? Well, it could be that UNRWA summer camp you sent them to 2 years ago.
Yeah, and to see that people like Philip Lazzarini are still in post after everything that's happened on his watch, and the smug, self-satisfied attitude you could see even at the time that the allegations came out, when it was evident to anybody watching him react to them that he was completely secure in his position and knew that nothing could touch him because he had the enemies of Israel on his side, and they are many. That was horrific to see.
I mean, there's good ideas and there's bad ideas. There are some ideas and cultures, this is, that are horrific and are anti-Western, anti-life cultures. My opinion, the Palestinian culture happens to be one of them. And, knowing that it all changes with ideas, the fact that even amidst a war, these ideas are still being changed. And again, it makes me think of the Second World War. Like, what needed to be happen was a military victory, but also for those Shinto ideas not to be taught anymore. And ultimately, that's what the West instituted. And I think what has to be instituted if we're ever going to get out of this another, crisis of an Arab war in the Middle East against Israel in the Middle East.
Sure. We have a couple more super chats. One from PC for $4.99, who just makes a comment on the Hamas camp video we showed earlier, which said, "Jews' home is Europe. I did not know Mizrahi Jews are European." Okay, well, thanks for the comment, PC. And EGS for £2 says, "UNRWA exists to extend a war that ended 76 years ago." And I think, yeah, that is a good point that I've heard mentioned a few times. What in whose interest is it to end the gravy train that is UNRWA when its existence is dependent upon the crisis continuing forever in its eyes? So of course it doesn't want a resolution to the conflict, and of course it only ever wants more money, as any of these large bodies do, and wants the taxpayer to continue to fund it. And of course, I mean, the US has been funding it to the tune of about $300 to $400 million a year. At the moment, of course, it's been suspect they're not going to they've passed a US law to stop Washington from continuing the funding until next year, and we'll have to see which president is in place and what he does at that point. But these are huge sums, and once they're gathered together, they become hard to follow, hard to account for, open to corruption and to funding directly the enemies that sustain the kind of conflict that keeps it going for 76 years.
Yeah, I mean, I think about a school run by, Dr. Peter Laporte's school or the Lisa Van Dam's Academy, private schools here in the States. And what could they do with an infusion of $200 or $300 couple $1 million to actually enable schools to teach the right ideas? And, it takes the funding. And I guess it's why, again, I'll emphasize, we appreciate the monthly contributors, your YouTube members, only, I think, £5 a month. It's not that much. Kathleen, El Rito, Equal to Reality, Bonnie Bertrand, Gail Parker, all of you, Kathleen, as I said, all of you that are Jesse Ryback, it's £5 a month. It goes so far to help us, let us be your voice for a reason. You've got a real job. You can't do it. You've got dedicated volunteers, smart people who are doing that. So help us out by making us part of your annual or your monthly YouTube subscriptions for £5 a month.
Yeah, certainly try not fund the UN, and certainly don't try not to get UNRWA funded again, because again, it's not like it's allegations and negative things that we're putting out there. They've been found to steal food aid. They've been found to promote on Twitter and through videos and publications October the 7th. They've been found, teachers from UNRWA have been found sending messages, and Eitan Fischberger did a great work about it. We got a few videos on the channel about this, where teachers are openly talking about how the celebration of October 7 was done among them. The UNRWA people have been found to hide equipment that have been found over and over again in UNRWA facilities, schools and depots. And terrorists are hiding in UNRWA facilities all the time. And recently, when the IDF went into Gaza, they started finding tunnels that connect facilities. The headquarters of UNRWA in Gaza has got a tunnel that connects it to different other facilities, UNRWA facilities. So are you telling me that nobody knew that there was a tunnel which was fed with electricity, water, and air conditioning and data cables? Come on, that's
It would be the same thing as if in the Second World War, if the UK and the United States were sending money to fund the Hitler Youth, the Aryan Hitler schools, because we'd say, well, look, we've got to do something for the kids. You know, the kids there, we've got to help the children. They need an education. So just, it would be the same idea, teaching them exactly those ideologies and not just complicit in these atrocities, but participating in them.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, thank you very much, Jonathan. Thank you to our super chatters, including to C. Defago from Switzerland, who did his very first super chat on this show. We appreciate it, and we appreciate all of your super chats very much. Jonathan, you have various books out there for people to source. What should people look for to find the best answers to these kind of questions? Would it be the textbook of a New Americanism?
Well, I mean, read Ayn Rand in any way you can find Ayn Rand. I mean, I was involved in the new textbook of Americanism, which, you know, is presents some of Miss Rand's ideas on politics in a really great, concise way. So it's on Amazon, and I invite you to check it out.
Yeah, definitely. And she also, in that particular book, she makes the point, and there are essays, I think, Greg Salmieri, when they talk about, when they make the point why a legitimate country is supposed to be the country that needs to be the existing one. Everything else, if a country doesn't support individual rights, it's not a legitimate country, and it doesn't have any right to exist. See Palestine. Okay, so yeah, I think we're out of time for today.
Yeah.
Unless you have anything else to.
No, but you have a Substack, or where can we find more of Marco and Richard?
Well, if you look at the sister channel to this, the Briefly Objective, where we make the short videos based on talks on this channel with edited footage that you can share on your social media to really get to the heart of each point that we're discussing, particularly in the course of this war in Israel. So do check that out. Down below under short, where it says for shorter content, you can find a link to it. So please, and of course, like, subscribe, and comment on this video as well, and all our videos to help promote them and have more people hear these ideas. And the necessary support that Israel needs at this time. So thank you very much, everyone. And we'll see you tomorrow for the Daily Objective, which will be on tomorrow on Saturday as well. So thank you very much. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you, Jonathan.